God. Oh, hey, how you guys doing? Get this party started. Here we go. By the Waters of Babylon. So hopefully the last couple of days you read it. You know what? I'm going to do this. I am actually going to set a timer on my phone to remind me not to go crazy long, because I have a feeling I could spend a lot of time on this. So I'm just going to start that. And when it buzzes, I'll try and be done. But there's a lot I want to go over. So by the Waters of Babylon, first of all, you might recognize the name Babylon. Okay. It's not actually in the story. What do you know the word Babylon from? If you've spent any time reading in the Bible, but also beyond the Bible, but specifically in the book of Daniel, Babylon is this power that goes in and essentially is the biggest power in ancient history. They just kept conquering and conquering these groups of people, and they just became huge and wealthy and so powerful. And so when we talk about Babylon, even today, what we're often doing is looking back to this idea of a great and powerful city. Well, what happened to Babylon? Great king, the highest of the heights, got knocked down a notch. And then his grandson knocked down a notch and was conquered by the Medes and the Persians, and then knocked down a notch and conquered by the Greeks. And they were knocked down a notch and conquered by the Romans. And so when we think of Babylon, we think of the highest of the height that just starts to crumble and fade. So every time you hear someone talk about Babylon, mention Babylon, that's what we're talking about. If you want to read the book of Daniel in the Bible, you get a lot more of that context of where we get Babylon from. So the Waters of Babylon, we're talking about a river next to a city that is being likened, connected, compared to the idea of Babylon. All right. In the other video last week, I was talking about how I thought Dreams Winter was written in the 30s. I was wrong. It's this story. My mistake. I apologize. This was written in 1937. And if you know your history, what happened shortly after that? Yeah. World War II and the atomic bomb. So that should definitely be coloring your understanding of this. So I am not going to read every line. What I'm going to do is kind of quickly go through and summarize, and then I'm going to jump on some of the more important ideas that I found. I asked you to read this and make 3 annotations per page as you think about it. So hopefully your understanding and my explanation are going to come together, and you're going to be like, hey, I understood this. I was right on. So it starts off very confusing, talking about the forbidden dead places. We get forbidden, 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 forbidden a bunch of times on this first page, page 705. Don't go to the dead places. Talks about the idea of the great burning, capital G, capital B, the great burning. Okay? We get this idea of the place of the gods, place of the gods. Now, you are a human being. If you were to approach the actual place of a god, you are a worthless, disgusting, foul, dirty, broken thing. And you're approaching a god, you are unworthy. By every definition, in any religion or no religion, the very idea of a god is better than you. And so we get this idea that there is a place of the gods. We don't go there. It's forbidden. We can't go there. And then it talks about his father being a priest, and it talks about how he is practicing to be a priest, and they go off and they're basically metal collectors. And so you get this idea, if you have to go and pick up pieces of metal, one, you are not making the metal. Today, we have all kinds of steel factories and aluminum factories, and we make our metal. But if your job is to go out and find the metal and bring it back, then you are not a producing culture. You're a scrounging culture. So that gives you a little bit of context about who these people are and where they're coming from. We might consider this as a little bit, undeveloped, uncivilized, right? They're just picking up pieces of old trash and then trying to use what they can in their own lives. All right. Page 706, paragraph 5. I was taught the chants and spells. Chants and spells. That's what we think of, maybe like a witch doctor or some like small tribe of, people who live in the forest who aren't, again, cultured or civilized, who have maybe strange religious beliefs, dancing around the fire kind of idea. We get this mention of the old days, capital O, capital D. And then paragraph 6, very important. It says, I wished to know more. His knowledge was lacking, and his knowledge just was a problem for him, his lack of understanding. All right. So let's see here. He wants to go to the city of his gods, and he is told it's forbidden, it's forbidden, it's forbidden. All these things are forbidden. And the young narrator says, all these things are forbidden, paragraph 15, I said, but it was my voice that spoke, not my spirit. I love that line. He says the words, but he doesn't feel it in his heart. He says, all these things are forbidden. I won't go there. Fingers crossed, right? Because then we find on paragraph 20 that he actually does go. And he says it was 8 suns' journey. They measure time by the passage of the sun. Actually, the sun doesn't go around, but you know what I mean. The point is that they don't talk about days or months or, the week. So again, that's that idea of a culture, of a group of people who are very much not like us. We would consider them less knowledgeable, less intelligent, less sophisticated. Okay, and then we get this mention of the God road, God-road. So think about it. What would you think if you just had to take a guess in today's world? What's a God road? What would a God road look like? All right, so he comes and page 708, paragraph 23. He says, how can I tell you what it's like? I don't have the words. You would never understand what I'm trying to tell you. You do not know. It was there in the red light. They're too big to be houses. So he sees these things are just monstrous. It's too big to be a house. And then I love it. He says, my magic did not help me. And yet there was a fire in my bowels, a fire in my mind. Of course, our bowels are like the lower part of our bellies, right? Like that's what we talk about, our bowels. But what we're talking about here is this fire within him, this fire in his mind, his heart, his bowels, this drive to do what he knows he's not supposed to do. And yet he feels compelled. He has to do it. He knows I would surely die, but if I did not go, I could never live at peace. If I go to this place of the gods, I know because my culture, my history, my tradition tells me that I, as a person, going to the place of the gods, I will die. But I can't not go. I have to go. So if I go and I die, at least I will satisfy my curiosity. And that's what I have in my annotations, that idea of curiosity. Okay, a couple of things I noticed in paragraph 25 and then 26 and 27. He talks about, my heart was as cold as a frog. Thought that was interesting. He says, I tried to think of my knowledge, but it was a squirrel's heap of winter nuts. That's kind of a funny one. A squirrel's heap of just a tiny little collection of nuts. That's all he knows. And yet he felt like he was as naked as a new hatched bird. What I find is interesting is all of these animal metaphors and his reliance on the natural world to explain things. He collects metal, but he uses nature to explain his ideas. He is, after all, from the forest people. And so I think what we're getting here is a setup between these two major ideas, the natural world, okay, and the world of metal. And we'll talk more about that later. But one of the things that made me think of, have you ever seen the movie 13 Monkeys? Okay, I know it's a little bit old. There's a gray one. But it really made me think of some of the images you get in that movie. All right, so he takes the raft and he goes across and he sees places of the great burning where fire fell out of the sky. And so we have to try and figure out what would be a great burning? What would cause fire to fall from the sky? Have you ever experienced anything like that? I have not experienced anything like that. I know I've seen historical videos that suggest such things. I have never been in a war zone, but I could certainly imagine if I were in a war zone, it might be like fire was falling from the sky. All right, he takes the raft, he goes across the river. He talks about the bitter water, again, capital B, capital W. What do you think bitter water is? Salt water? Where would be a place big enough to be called the salt water? The ocean? Good job if you thought of it as the ocean. And the river flows out to the ocean. All right, paragraph 30. It feels like the ground underfoot. It did not burn me. It is not true what some of the tales say, that the ground burns forever. So he's starting to notice that these tales and these ideas that he had been taught were not actually true. Don't go to the place of the gods. The ground burns forever. Well, no, it doesn't. It's not burning. There's marks and stains of fire. There was fire, but there is not now. He says, it is a great dead place, greater than any dead place we know. So he recognizes that there is death all around here. How can I tell you what I saw? And then he talks about the sun. How can I tell you what I saw? He says again. He talks about the fishhawk, the butterflies. Again, to me, that says life. So even though he's in the dead place, we now have examples of two pets. And in a minute, in paragraph 33, he talks about the pigeons, which I think there's this very funny little part here. He says, there are many pigeons. The gods must have loved them. Or, you ever been to a big city? And the pigeons everywhere? Does anyone love pigeons? No. So I think it's kind of funny. But what I'm starting to notice here is he talks about these gods. And he talks about these places that are bigger than homes. And he talks about Ubtres and Ashing. Sorry, I got to sneeze. All right, so I'm going to show you a couple of things here. Oh, there it is. Excuse me. All right. There's a place in New York where there is a statue of Ashing, but it's not actually Ashing. Can you see here? It says George Washington. And perhaps you might recognize that Ubtreus, take those letters, you get sub-treasury. Sub-treasury building with a statue of Ashing, Washington. You know what that tells me? It tells me that we are not actually talking about a made-up place. We are now talking about a real place. And we are talking about real things that our narrator is seeing, but they are so old and so broken and so crumbled, he can only make out parts of it. So instead of this whole word, he's getting a part of it. So he only understands a little bit of it, but I'm starting to get a much better understanding because I'm like, statue of Ashing, a dude with girl's hair pulled back. You ever seen old pictures of George Washington with his little ponytail pulled back? All right. He goes on, the pigeons, the wildcats, the wild dogs. So if this is a place of death, how is there so much life? Paragraph 34 is kind of funny. He talks about how these gods, they didn't get food from the forest or hunt the way we do and kill a deer and eat it. They got food from magical boxes and jars. Do you eat any food out of a jar? Do you eat any food out of a box? Are you able to simply open a box and take food out? That'd be kind of magical, especially if you don't know what's going on. All right, 36 and 37, he starts talking about this dog who follows him, and he's get this sense of danger here. But what I think is interesting is right here, right before we get to paragraph 38. It says, but a dog cannot open a door. The human kind of laughs at the foolishness of the animal. Even though the animal poses danger to him, there's this idea of, I'm going to use technology, a door, and I'm going to stop him and protect myself. And this dog is not going to be able to open the door because he's a dumb, foolish, ignorant dog. There's my timer. I'm going to press on for a few more minutes, which is fine. Okay. So if it goes off again, then we got a problem. But we're wrapping up here. All right. So this idea of the technology to a lower mind with the dog. All right. And then he moves on and he goes into this building and he discovers this art and this painting and he's just in awe of it. And he says, how wise these gods must be, full of knowledge. He sees all of these books. And then if you look at paragraph 40, he's really confused. He sees a washing place, but no water, a cooking place, but no wood, lamps, but no oil. Where in your home do you have a washing place with no water? A washing machine, perhaps? A cooking place with no wood? A stove and an oven? Or a microwave, perhaps? Do you have anything that looks like a lamp? That doesn't need oil? Like maybe a light? So he sees these things that we now recognize as just part of our everyday life. We know what he's seeing. He has no idea. So I am starting, as the reader, starting to get a much better understanding of where he is and what he is experiencing, even though he has no knowledge of it. All right, jumping over to page 713. Paragraph 45, he says, I knew that I was seeing the city as it had been when the gods were alive. And so he lies down, he starts to have a vision. Now, he is considered a priest, and he says he has this vision, and he sees all of these lights, just thousands and thousands of lights. Just where did all these torches come from? Well, we know they're not torches. They're just electricity. They're just light bulbs turned on. Right? He says, it was magic what they could do. It was magic what they did. No, it was scientific understanding and electricity, things that we take for granted. But to somebody who's never experienced it, of course it would feel magical. They flew in the air. These gods flew in the air. You ever flown in the air? Of course you have, on an airplane, right? No part of the earth was safe from them. Now that one gets me. That one stabs me. No part of the earth was safe from them. And I think that's true. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I think that's a major part of the theme here in this story. Look at the way we've contrasted the natural world with the metal and the buildings and the structures. What do? We pave paradise. We put up a parking lot. Pave paradise, put up a parking lot. You know the song? Yeah. What do? We destroy mountains and we build up cities. We create dams to stop rivers. And yeah, it makes a lot of cool things for humanity, but it also destroys a lot of nature. And while we are creators, we are also destroyers in that process. And I think that line is so, so critical, so important, especially if you are into the whole, Greenpeace movement, if you want the green energy or the Green New Deal, where everything is renewable resources. All right, and then we get another idea here. Were they happy? What is the happiness to the gods? Well, they're all dead and gone. So you tell me, were they happy? They weren't happy enough to not destroy themselves. I think that's a really powerful question. And I don't think we can answer it completely. I think that's the kind of question we have to answer always. Just like the idea of no part of the earth was safe from them. We protect parts of the earth. We have national parks and national beaches and all that stuff. But sometimes we still fail. We still build hotels in national parks. All right. He had seen men die. He had seen people fight in wars. But when gods war with gods, they use weapons we do not know. Think about this. This was on the advent of the atomic bomb. Massive destruction. And it talks about on page 714, so I am coming to the end here. The poison was still on the ground. If you've seen the miniseries Chernobyl, or you know about what happens with the radioactivity, it literally poisons the ground. Nothing can grow, nothing can live for decades and decades and decades. All right. It seemed to me that it should not have happened. But with all the magic they had, this guy looks around at their world and goes, "Why did you destroy this? Look at all this amazing stuff. And yet you still fought?" And when gods fight with gods, man, it's complete and utter destruction. And then he finds a person who has been, skin's dried out as a dead person, right? And he realizes, paragraph 52, "For then I knew he was a man." They had all been men. They went down a dark road. These people that we called gods are not gods. They were men, just like me, just like you. And he's like, oh my goodness. He comes home and he tells his dad, "Dad, I went to the dead place and I came back and I'm alive, and it's not what we think it is." And his dad says, "Slow down. We are not going to tell everyone." And he says this: "Truth is a hard deer to hunt." Again, that animal metaphor, I love it. "If you eat too much truth at once, you may die of the truth. It was not idly that our fathers forbade the dead places." It was not idly, which means it was not foolishness that our ancestors said don't go there. If the ground was poisoned, maybe there was a good reason to not go there. Maybe the poison is gone now. Maybe life is returning now. Maybe things are changing now. But for a long time, the truth was actually that that was the dead place and you could not go there. And so the father tells his son, "Maybe there will be a time to tell our community, but we will tell them slowly, because this opening up of a whole new world will just radically change everything we know about everything." And sometimes people freak out when you change everything you know about everything. So we get to paragraph 55 and it says, "We will make a beginning. At least we will make a beginning." So the ending of our story really is the beginning of their new world, which I read as a hopeful thing, right? They're going to kind of lift themselves out of this ignorance of these being priests, of being the forest people. Maybe they'll start to see that they can build culture. What do they miss? They don't know what art is. Don't you want a culture with art? Isn't art beautiful? All right. And then we get this idea of they go to the place New York, where the god Ashing and the gods Lincoln and Biltmore must be. The Biltmore is a hotel. And Moses, it talks about Robert Moses. There's a statue of Robert Moses there in New York as well. But then, so where I start to see hope comes with a very twist here at the last line. And it says, "We must build again." Isn't that both positive and negative? What's going to happen in another 5,000 years from this moment in our story? Will humanity have built itself up again? Built itself up as gods? Huge skyscraping towers, vast monuments to our creativity, huge engineering, scientific, structural creations where we completely cover the earth. And then what are we going to do again? Are we going to be happy? Are we going to find peace? Or are we going to fight with other gods and destroy everything? And I think that's part of the big question. What is humanity's problem? We can do big, amazing, cool things. We can go into the dead places. We can actually find a life where everything is dead, like our narrator. And yet we have the same cyclical process where we go again and again, again and again. We go back to Babylon. We get to the heights, and it comes crashing down. Rome wasn't built in a day. And what do we know about Rome now? It's literally ancient ruins, broken rocks that you can go and visit. Someday, is New York going to come crashing down to a metal heap? I don't know. we built weapons that completely destroyed and obliterated cities, millions of people like that. In some ways, we have the power of little gods. And yet we are men, and we have all the wisdom, and yet we are foolish. We have machines that can wash and cook without any trouble. And yet, are we happy? Oh, it's such a good story. Oh, all right. I'm going to leave it with that. Okay, you guys. So, with that, I'm going to get this party started.